everyone. Thank you for watching today as I am joined with some of our staff members from the Adult Services Department, and we are going to be talking about our favorite books that we've read during summer reading this year. So without further ado, we will start with Holly, and she will let us know her favorite books of the summer so far.
The first book I'll talk about is James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son. This is actually the second title in our reading series that we're doing in conjunction with Literary Cleveland. We still have one left in August, The Fire Next Time we'll be talking about, if anybody wants to participate. I generally stay away from books that start with the word notes. It's just like a weird thing I've developed over the years, but I do like Notes of a Native Son. There's a nice bit of variety, and like often with notes books, I feel like they're kind of just like too much all over the place, but this has a really nice balance. It's really well done. Obviously it's an older title, but it's really enjoyable. I particularly liked the sort of memoir bits, memoiristic bits in there, more so than the criticism, I would say, partly because some of the things he was critiquing I just haven't seen or read. But yeah, it was really enjoyable. And then the next book I would talk about today is Take Me Apart, which I actually started reading in like January, and it was so suspenseful and I was already feeling anxious about other things that I like made myself set it aside because I was like too invested in the story, which is a good thing. But also I typically listen to books as audiobooks, and I typically do it at night while I'm trying to fall asleep. So it was not helping me accomplish that goal of falling asleep. But I did finally relax enough to finish the book, and I'm really glad I did because I really liked the ending. So if you get like 2/3 of the way through Take Me Apart, and you're like, I don't know if I can finish this. If it ends badly, I'm going to be really upset. I encourage you to just finish it. And then the third book I actually have not finished, but I'm currently listening to it. It is an art criticism book. I've been thinking a lot about like podcasts and books that are sort of like the relationship between podcasts and audiobooks. Like, for example, the 99% Invisible book has been really popular, and that was originally a podcast and then became a book and then became like an audiobook. And I really liked that title. And this is a collection of an art critic's writing over a long period of time, 1988 to 2018. And it's just, rather than, I don't know, I guess I'm interested in seeing who decides to go the podcast route, who goes like the audiobook route. But I guess that's kind of behind the scenes-y book production types of things. His writing is really, it's really like confident and really swift. Obviously, he's been a critic for a very long time, and he just has like a style of writing that I find very refreshing. And one thing is that he is talking about a lot of like paintings and works of art that I have not seen. And like I said, I often listen to these things when I'm trying to fall asleep at night, so I'm not gonna like get out the laptop, look up the item. So I just end up sort of imagining what he's describing and talking about, and then the next day, if I remember, I'll go and look it up. And it's interesting to see how they compare, like the thing I had imagined versus the actual work of art. And so far, my favorite part of that book has been finding out that Andy Warhol, who his like video art, which is not as well known, was often like long shots of everyday things or just like a building. And apparently his gravestone, his spot in a cemetery, is on a like 24/7 live stream that you can just see at any point online, which is like a really beautiful tribute um, to the artist himself. Um, and I just think that's really cool because that's like probably what he would have wanted. Like the man who filmed like the Chrysler Building for 8 hours in one go probably would have really liked that. So, and I was watching it a little bit the other day, and you can just see people like come and they kind of like wave at the camera and they leave like a Campbell soup can, and I don't know, it's weird, but I like it. So those are the books.
Thank you, Holly. Those are some really awesome picks. So yeah, next we have Frank.
Yes, hi. The first book I read this summer was Cleveland Rocked by Zach Meisel. He's a sports writer for the Athletic website, and he's a pretty frequent guest on a lot of the local sports talk shows. I'm not sure how old he is exactly, but he's like a younger guy, so he wouldn't have been an adult during the 90s when this book takes place. But I think he does a pretty good job of researching and capturing the zeitgeist of the time. I could tell this right away because the first chapter of the book is titled "This Is How We Do It," after the Michael or the Montel Jordan song of the same name. You're probably more familiar with it these days because it's in a lot of recent commercials. He also goes a bit into the flats, that kind of legendary '90s party scene that was taking place along the Cuyahoga River. And a lot of Indians fans today, they kind of look back on the '90s teams as kind of a golden era, but it didn't actually start out that way. They had to kind of earn the fans' acceptance. But at this point in time, their last championship was in the 1940s, and that's still true today. But um, through most of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they had a pretty spotty win-loss record, so they kind of had to earn their keep with the fans. Also, what really helped is that they had a lot of colorful players, a lot of charisma. You'll see people today even still wear the t-shirts and jerseys of players, names like Carlos Baerga, Kenny Lofton, Sandy Alomar. So even if you're not a baseball fan, you've probably seen people around town wear their names on their shirts even to this day. Another colorful character of the era was Albert Bell. He was kind of he was known for being a pretty grouchy guy. Surly is the word that pops up pretty often. He was known for his famous bicep pose, and then the book humorously goes into other famous poses by Indians players throughout the years. But the bicep pose is ranked number one in Mr. Meisel's opinion. And there is, of course, a Euclid connection to the controversial Albert Bell. Halloween night of 1995, some bad children egged his house, and he chased after them in a vehicle. I have looked into more details by checking the Euclid Sun Journal archives that we have at our website, euclidlibrary.org. Looking at the police blotter for the edition that came out right after Halloween, I couldn't find any details of Mr. Bell's wild ride. But I'm sure it was a high profile case at the time, so they probably figured it was a bit too of a bit too exciting for our Euclid Sun Journal. Um, it is still a mystery to me which house exactly Albert Bell did have in Euclid. I'm assuming that it probably was like a nice house on the lake, but my research is yet to be concluded on that. So again, like if you're interested in kind of the times of the '90s and reading about some colorful characters, I would recommend Cleveland Rocked by Zach Meisel. And as baseball is certainly a unique occupation, so too is being an astronaut. And that brings me to my next book, Shoot for the Moon by James Donovan. Now, of course, being an astronaut, that's if you've ever seen any footage of these liftoffs and stuff, it's a very deathly serious a job. So you really have to be a perfectionist to do the job correctly. And of course, astronauts are. A lot of them come from a military background or as flight test pilots. So with all that professionalism and seriousness comes a little bit of a wild spirit or a little bit of a maverick edge. And I think this book, it kind of does a very good job of showing that sometimes, yeah, they would kind of go a little bit uh, off the uh, off the beaten path and kind of do things their own way. Since NASA is a civilian organization, they never really faced any uh, disobedience punishment or anything of that. They don't get court-martialed for kind of mouthing back at mission control. But either way, they the NASA higher-ups didn't like it if they were up there in space and on TV, and they kind of questioned the necessity of experiments they had to do and things like that. Um, so with the astronauts, of course, a little bit of charisma is required. This was also during the dawning of the television era, and NASA, it takes a huge amount of budget, so they kind of had to justify to the public year after year why it's necessary to do this. One way to do it was, well, through fear. Our rivals at the time were the Russians, so um, it was a matter of national security for us to be in the space race and to compete with the Russians. But also there is just a little bit of that showmanship too. We had to kind of keep topping ourselves time after time to kind of keep the public's interest. And the big main event of the show was to the eventual landing on the moon. Um, so going back to the astronauts' personal lives, that this kind of occupation where you're training for days and days, years and years, it does take a toll on some of them, particularly with the wives and the children. And also, 1968, that was a particularly bad year just in the world in general. That was the year, of course, where Robert Kennedy was killed, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. There was, of course, the constant threat of the Cold War. China had the nuclear bomb at that point, and there was starvation in Africa, like a really bad famine that year. But towards the end of that year, around Christmas time, was kind of a dry run for the moon landing, where the astronauts kind of went around the moon and they buzzed it, and they were able to take pictures of Earth from the dark side of the moon. And what really struck out to me was one of the astronauts got a message that year saying, "Oh, well, 1968 was such a bad year, but seeing our nice little blue planet there at the end, we kind of you did and you saved the year for us in the end." And I think that kind of rings true today. Everyone's saying, "Oh boy, 2020 was pretty rough on us," and 2021 really isn't too much better, but I think it's kind of nice to look back and think, oh, well, decades ago, people were kind of thinking the same thing. So, yeah, I recommend this book as well. It doesn't get too technical and it provides like a lot of excitement and insight into the personal lives of the astronauts and the other people that worked on the program. So those are the two books I enjoyed the most, and I'll let Brianna or Carla take it from here.
Thank you, Frank. Those are really great recommendations. And next up, we have my books. So the first book that I want to talk about is called Milkfed by Melissa Broder. Now, I knew as soon as I saw this book that I wanted to put it on hold. And the premise is so we have our main protagonist. Her name is Rachel. She's a 24-year-old lapsed Jew, and she has an eating disorder. We start off with her waking up in the morning, and she goes through her entire day. And her entire day is just overwhelmed with thoughts of food. So everything's a numbers game. Everything, is a balancing game. So if she eats this now, that means, she can't have this later. She's always thinking in the background. It really kind of controls her life. And part of the reason that she does have anorexia is stems from the relationship she had with her mother. Her and her mom really do not get along. And as Rachel goes to therapy, we see, the therapist is well aware of this, and she actually suggests to Rachel that she cut all ties with her mom for, I believe it's 3 months. And she wants Rachel to take that time and try to distance herself from from her mom's voice in her ear. And Rachel does not want to do this. And she kind of storms out of the therapist's office, but she can't stop thinking about what she said. So Rachel does cut ties with her mom. And very shortly after that, it's like literally the next day, she goes to her favorite froyo place. She goes to this frozen yogurt shop every work day. That's what she does for lunch. She gets a sub, and then she also gets like 1 scoop of ice cream, no toppings. It's very exact and regimented. And she is very surprised when she walks into the froyo shop, and it's not the regular, teen boy at the cash register. It is someone new. And the boy never really questioned her, never asked if she wanted a larger size, never asked if she wanted to add toppings. He really just let her do her own thing. By contrast, this new employee is very bold. So she looks at Rachel's 1 scoop of, it's like plain, frozen yogurt. And she's like, oh, don't you want to add something? And immediately Rachel is on the defensive. And while it starts out as a very, rough relationship, there's something about the frozen yogurt employee, whose name is Miriam, that kind of pulls Rachel towards her. She is envious that Miriam seems to, have a sort of freedom that she has never had in her life up until that point. She eats what she wants. She has a great relationship with her family. And as the two grow closer, Rachel starts giving in to her own desires, whether that's for food or for companionship or, just for finding out, more about herself. So I put this book on hold because I thought it was primarily a romance. And I will admit I was wrong about that. I would say it's mostly a story, a personal journey. And the romance is definitely a side plot that moves, the main plot, which is Rachel's, story of growing into herself and kind of slowly moving past, the way she's done things for a decade. I will say the ending was not what I expected at all. I finished the last page and I kind of sat there for a minute, like, that's it? That's how it ends? That's what Broder decided to do? But I think it was necessary and it was really thought-provoking, especially as someone who reads romance and expects the happily ever after. I like the way that the ending that is focused on Rachel, really serves to, emphasize the entire point of the story. So yeah, I would definitely recommend Milkfed. And then the next book I have is called Pretty Boys by David Yee. Now this book came across my social media feed a month or 2 ago, and there's a whole chapter in it about a music group that I really like. So as soon as I saw that, I put it on hold. But I really enjoyed this book for, everything about it, not just the chapter with the group that I was familiar with. So this book is all about legendary icons who redefined beauty. And David Yee, covers everything from, ancient Egyptians to Clark Gable in the 1930s to the ancient, or not ancient, but the warriors in the Korean Joseon dynasty, in the 1300s to 1700s. So his book is really comprehensive, and I think it takes such a great look at what masculinity has meant throughout the years and what it has meant in different regions. I learned so much that I didn't know, from influential figures to just different perspectives, something that I knew but hadn't really had reinforced, or I hadn't really confronted so completely, was that beauty and standards of beauty can be political. And David Yi really, showed that in several different chapters, especially a chapter on the Black Panther Party, which I thought was really interesting. And so, through this, we, discuss, again, like he covered every continent. He covered ancient civilizations all the way up to Harry Styles and Frank Ocean and Bad Bunny. And it was just a really complete look at, this, not even a growing movement, but something that's always been here that we oftentimes think is, on the fringes of society. And one last thing that I wanted to mention about this book was that it's not just a history lesson. It also has a gorgeous cover, and it's full of drawings and illustrations inside. And he also, every chapter, he has, a practical guide for anyone reading. So there's steps on, facials and how to do your nails, and, how to have your own glow up as the reader, which I, really appreciated and loved about this book. So those are the first two books. And then my next two books are both fiction. So the next book I wanted to recommend is called Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. And I read this book, or I read the first book that Murata had translated into English a couple years ago. That one was called Convenience Store Woman. I absolutely loved it. And I think that it really cemented Murata as someone that I wanted to keep an eye out for. So when I heard she had another book coming out being translated in English from Japanese, I immediately put a hold on it. And the premise is quite different to Convenience Store Woman. So in Earthlings, we start with a child. Her name is Natsuki, and she doesn't really have very many friends. She feels like an outsider. She really just kind of feels all alone, like no one gets her. And her best friend is a pet hedgehog called Piet. And, he kind of takes on, a imaginary friend persona, where she imagines that Piet talks to her and he has all these things to say. And he tells her that she is an alien. And so we see her kind of take this on, and she starts to think of everyone else as an earthling. And she's the alien in a foreign land, trying to navigate the world. And we see that she has another friend or companion and her cousin, Yu. And Yu is the same age that she is, and he gets her. So he also thinks that everyone is an earthling and he's an alien, and it's kind of them against the world. And we see their relationship, their cousins, kind of morph into something incestuous. They do, get into a relationship, and when the parents find out, they, of course, take them apart and tell them that they are never to see each other again. And that happens when Suki is around 11 years old, like 5th grade. And so we have her childhood point of view as she, goes through this or enters this relationship with you, and they have like a marriage ceremony, and they're like each other's first boyfriend girlfriend. And then there's a relationship with a teacher that Natsuki does not understand, but that the reader knows is very morally, wrong. And so we go from that to adult Natsuki. And as an adult, she is in her 30s, and she's married. She's married to an asexual man. They found each other on a website that is known for bringing together couples who have challenges to relationships. And so they pretty much just lived together, and they got married because they wanted their families off their back. They have separate finances. They do not touch. They do their own chores. They very much keep to themselves and are only married in the eyes of the government. So as the story goes along and we learn more about how Natsuki works, at the core of the book is the fact that her entire life, Natsuki feels like an outsider. She is alienated from society, and that is like a constant feedback loop into her, feeling like an actual alien. And as things progress, it's a dark book. It covers a lot of themes that aren't for the faint of heart. But what I really love about Sayaka Murata is her commentary, her social commentary. And so even though the book is kind of removed from reality, you see her talking about the roles of women in society, the roles of, married couples in the eyes of family and friends and strangers. And so whenever I finished the book, I actually wasn't sure what to think because I kind of couldn't believe it ended the way it did. And so I actually went online and I looked up reviews because I wanted to know what everyone else thought. And a lot of people said that they were repulsed by the book and that they did not enjoy it. And it was nothing like Convenience Store Woman, to which I will agree to a certain extent that it is not like Convenience Store Woman, but I think that it is, from the 2 books that I've read by her, I think it definitely stayed in keeping with what Murata does best, which is have these really interesting characters who, because they are removed from society, because they do feel like they aren't part of everything around them, they have really interesting insights about what's going on, and they're able to, talk about culture and people in a way that I think it's natural to want to shy away from or not want to question. So yeah, that was Earthlings. I would definitely recommend it. I saw someone describe it as a psychological horror story, which if that had been like a tagline on the cover, I never would have picked it up. But while I see those elements, I think it's just a really good fiction book about, contemporary society. So yeah, that's Earthlings. And then for my last book, I have The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nevo. This is a modern take on The Great Gatsby. So I will admit that I've never read The Great Gatsby, but whenever I saw that The Chosen and the Beautiful was making a lot of books of the summer list, I wanted to read it. I think the cover is like beautiful, and that was definitely part of the appeal at first, but I really like the premise. So in The Great Gatsby, we had Jordan Baker as a character, and then in the modernist take by Vo, we see that Jordan is a Vietnamese person, and she was adopted when she was a child and brought to the United States to grow up in, the 1920s glamour lifestyle. She is adored in society. She's invited to all the parties. Everyone goes to her parties. But no matter how many friends she has, or how packed her social calendar is, she is still othered because she is a queer Asian woman. And throughout, her life, throughout the story, we see that, she can never really escape that or sidestep it. And something else that I really enjoyed about the book is that Vo added like a magical realism aspect to the book. So I thought that was really well done. And I really liked how she played with, magic and people having abilities and not everything being as it seemed. So I don't think that this book is going to make me want to read The Great Gatsby. But I think that, I really recommend this for anyone who does like modern takes on classics and is looking for a bit more diversity in their reads. So yeah, with that, I have finished all of my recommendations. And last but not least, we have Carla.
Alrighty, I have 3 books to talk about today and recommend and share. So the first one there is by Andy Weir. The title is Project Hail Mary, and it's set in the not too distant future. It's a science fiction kind of thriller book, and it's about an interstellar mission to save the planet Earth. So there's this newly discovered microscopic life form that is consuming solar energy. And it's happening at a pretty fast rate, and essentially it's destroying the sun. And obviously that's pretty significant problem for Earth. So the scientists who've discovered this astrophage have also discovered a solar system that also has astrophage, but in that solar system, the sun is not dying. So their plan is to send scientists to this other solar system so they can figure out what's going on and hopefully save planet Earth. So that is the setup of the book, but the book opens up to one of these scientists who's our main character. His name is Ryland Grace. He wakes up after being in a coma so he can survive the space travel. And he's disoriented, he's confused, he has these huge gaps in his memory, and he's alone because the other 2 scientists did not live through the travels. So he's all by himself and he has to figure out all of this himself. He has to review the mission, remember the science. He has to go through all of this to save planet Earth. So it was a really fast-paced book. It had a high-stakes story, which I really liked. And the whole thing is told from Ryland's point of view. And this author, Andy Weir, has written a couple of other books, most notably The Martian, which came out about 10 years ago, and it was made into a really great movie. So I would say this is very similar to that book. He's really known for adding a lot of scientific detail to his stories. But I'm not a scientist, obviously, I'm a librarian, but it was still really easy for me to follow. He explains it in very simple terms. So I would recommend it even if you're not necessarily a science fiction reader. It's more of a fiction book with science in it, but it was really great. It was exciting and it was interesting. So I would recommend that book. It's pretty new as well. And then the next book I'd like to share is called The Sweetness of Water. This is a relatively new book. It's gotten great reviews. It's historical fiction. And it was chosen as an Oprah Book Club pick. And it's also on President Obama's summer 2021 reading list. So this is a debut novel, and it's set just at the very end of the Civil War in a rural town in Georgia called Old Ox. And outside of the town are farms and homesteads and plantations, as that's what happened during the time. And so as the Civil War's ending, we have newly freed men and women who are on the move. They're leaving farms where they were enslaved and they're looking for a future. And our main character are 2 of these freedmen, Prentice and Landry, and they are recently emancipated and they've been hired to work on the Walker's farm. And the Walker's family consists of a husband, wife, and a son who's a Confederate soldier and newly returned from from serving in the war, and they've hired the Prentice and Landry to plant a new crop of peanuts. So they're good people. They're paying a fair wage. They're trying to help them out. But this does not sit well with some of the people in the town of Old Ox. And there's just so much tension in this town, this rural town in Georgia. We have soldiers who are returning home from war. We have grieving families. We have Union soldiers that are stationed in the town to make sure everyone follows the rules and the new laws. And we have free men and women who are trying to earn enough money to go on to somewhere else. So the whole town is just seething with all this tension. And the author really does a great job of making this just come alive. And in the midst of all this tension, we have a forbidden romance between two Confederate soldiers who meet in the woods. And when they're discovered, it sets off this chain of tragic events that just kind of propel the story to a pretty explosive ending. So while it does have a good story, this is really more of a character-driven book. The writing is what I would consider literary writing. It's very descriptive. It's very atmospheric. It's not really something maybe someone who reads a lot of genre fiction only would like. It's more, has a more literary feel to it. It's very focused on developing the characters and creating a sense of place and time. So it was very good. And the author really did an amazing job considering it's a debut novel. So, and the last one I wanted to share with you is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And this book is just a fun summer read, kind of a romantic comedy romance book. So our main characters are Poppy and Alex, and they've been friends since freshmen in college, even though they're very different people. So for example, Alex is a high school teacher. He was very happy to settle back into his hometown in Southern Ohio. Poppy, on the other hand, dropped out of college. She wants to travel the world, and she's gotten a great job in Manhattan working for a travel magazine, and she's paid to travel the world. But even though they're in different places, they really take time to stay connected, and every year they go on a vacation in the summer. Well, something happened 2 years ago, and it destroyed their friendship. So now in the present, Poppy wants to reconnect with Alex. So she reaches out to him and she suggests a vacation, and he agrees. So they take another vacation, and the story from here kind of goes back and forth between what happened 2 years ago, and it actually goes through all the vacations in the last 10 years and just shows snippets of it. And then also what's happening on this current vacation, which is really kind of funny and disastrous. Everything goes wrong. So it was really cute. And I just have to say, this was the perfect summer read. It was a delightful romance. It was very funny and touching and had some angst to it. And I really highly recommend it. It was really one of the better romances I've read all year. So I can highly recommend that one. And that's really all I have to say. I can recommend all of those and all of the other books people have shared. I'll let Brianna kind of close us out there.
Yes, thank you, Carla. Those summer reading picks sound wonderful. And I just want to thank everyone for watching us. I hope that, everyone found a book that they might want to try out, something that sounded really engaging and interesting. There are so many to choose from. And all of the books that we did share today should be available through CleveNet. So, we invite you to, put those on hold and check those out either digitally or in print.